Hey, welcome to the episode 4 of the Inner Work Podcast with my man Paul.
My man Jason.
So today I'm inspired to talk to you more about a practice that you introduced me to, which was Yoga Nidra. For those that are unfamiliar, can you give a little brief introduction of what the practice is about?
Yes, sir. Yoga Nidra is it's an up and coming practice in the world of yoga. A lot more people are learning about it all the time, and for good reasons. It's basically yogic sleep. Nidra means sleep, and Yoga Nidra is conscious sleep, actually. What it is specifically is relaxing on your back and letting the physical body actually fall asleep. Except we maintain awareness instead of just going unconscious like many of us do when we sleep. It's not even the dream world, because in the dream world, we're not really aware. We are aware at a very kind of like a spectator type level. Like a dream is kind of like you're watching it happen in a way. But Yoga Nidra, you're conscious, and we don't just let ourselves go randomly. We're directed by a voice. Now, at the more advanced stages of practice, you can guide your own Yoga Nidra practice. But for most humans, for most of our experience, we'll be listening to a recording, guiding us into a deep state of relaxation. And there are so many benefits of this practice called Yoga Nidra. It's amazing.
So how did you get introduced to it?
Mainly through Rod Stryker. When I started studying with him in 2014, I had been exposed to the practice a couple of times prior to studying with Rod Stryker, just through a book that was given to me by a student. There are a couple different major approaches to the practice of Yoga Nidra. And the book that was given to me is from an organization called the Bihar Yoga School. I did look into the book, I read it, and I taught some practices. This is probably 2013, 2014 when I started doing this. And I thought it was very fascinating, but I didn't really dive deeply into it until I started traveling to Colorado 2-3 times a year to study with Rod Stryker. And then he had been into Yoga Nidra for years and years. His teacher, Pandit Rajmani Tiganayat, and his teacher, Swami Rama, were also very big into Yoga Nidra. So I started studying, getting more involved, and learning more about it in 2015-16 timeframe.
So when I think about, whenever I hear the word yoga, I always, even though I know that it's beyond the physical practice, but for a lot of people that maybe don't practice, aren't unaware that even though it says yoga in it, that maybe there isn't as much of a physical practice. Can you talk about why that terminology is even there?
Yes. I love this talk, because yoga, when we hear the word yoga, we usually think of a downward dog or a vinyasa practice with sun salutations, or warrior 1, warrior 2, warrior 3, that kind of thing. That's a Western world connotation. But if we were to travel to India or Sri Lanka, or probably even the Far East, China and Japan and some of the other Far Eastern places, the word yoga has a different connotation, and largely it means meditation. The word yoga would conjure up the idea of sitting still in a meditative pose, rather than having it conjure up the idea of Lululemon pants and sweating with neon lights and a great playlist in a studio, which is the Western worldview. So that's the first difference. And then we can just dive deeper into what the actual word yoga means. And we've probably mentioned it on our podcast multiple times already, that yoga means union, consciously getting to know our higher self. Like, we know our lower self pretty well. You know, you're a dude, you're a doctor, you got a name, you got a skin color. I'm a dude, I'm not a doctor. I have a skin color. We know our lower, that's our lower nature, but do we really know our soul? Can we say that we live through our soul's eyes and our soul's intention? That's what union in the word yoga means. And getting to that knowingness of your higher self and living through our higher self is a little bit more accessible through the practice of Yoga Nidra, because we kind of get rid of our brain, really. We get rid of our ego. We lay down in stillness, and we find this place of consciousness that is uprooted from our physical existence in a sense. So it's awesome.
Yeah. So how would you describe the feeling you get out of the physical practice of yoga, like a class that maybe you teach, versus a Yoga Nidra session? Like, what do you feel during versus and after comparatively?
It's so good to think about this and talk about this, man. And after I share mine, I wanted to hear yours too, because you practice a lot of yoga as well, physical and mental yoga. The postures that we all love doing, they are physically sensational, and that isn't really yoga. Being a steward of our body and taking care of our health is part of what yoga is, yes. But just doing physical exercises, you can also call it acrobatics if we're doing a lot of arm balances or exotic shapes with our body. Is that yoga? Well, not really. It's not. You can do a lot. You can be the best acrobat in the world and do every yoga posture ever conceived of with perfect alignment and hold it still and never do yoga because the mental component might not be addressed. Conversely, you can sit in a meditative, sit still and transcend the physical and do yoga without having ever done a posture. So back to the question of how do I feel after a physical practice versus a more of a meditative practice. In the physical practices, there are a few pointers that were given by the wise teachers, namely Patanjali, the guy that I like to study a lot from the Yoga Sutras. And he says very simply, when you can be still in the posture, no matter if it's a handstand or a seated pose. So first be still, allow some ease and stability in your stillness, whatever pose you're in. So relax extra effort and find stability. So do those things and then take your mind and focus it on something greater than yourself, because your physical body is only temporary. It's only a little necessary. It is necessary, but only a little bit in the grand scheme. Then you can achieve a state of yoga while doing physical practices. He doesn't specifically mention the breath when he's talking about physical postures, but the breath is obviously important as well. And when you can regulate the breathing with equal inhales and equal exhales, that's what also ushers us through that magic doorway into something more spiritual. Otherwise, we're just doing acrobatics and calisthenics and exercise. So I am happy to say that I do feel at the end of a physical practice that I did real yoga, where I accessed something that's more deep, more subtle. And at the same time, you feel really good because you got the blood flowing. Your brain has more access to oxygenated blood. Your prana has been shifted. So I'm a big believer in prana as well, and chakras and meridian lines. And when you're moving your body in different ways and breathing and spreading the chest open and back bending and forward folding, you're moving energy. And so after a physical practice, I feel really good in a lot of ways. Calmer, more stable, a natural smile might just appear. I'm a little more clear. So after I calm down and maybe take a shower and then just put some new clothes back on, I'm more clear, and you can move through your day a little bit better, and things are a little bit more positive. And same thing with a good meditation. In the mornings, I like to go out in the backyard and sit in the sun in the mornings and do breathing practices and then a meditation. I feel similar after those, not exactly the same because I wasn't moving my body, but I did move some prana. I did focus the mind. I did uproot my consciousness from the physical world a little bit. So you can achieve a similar feeling after a physical practice and after a meditation. Yeah.
Oh, can you help me understand what you mean by uproot your your consciousness from your physical body?
Yeah. I love saying that. I love saying that because it seems like a really appropriate analogy for this process of orienting ourselves to our subtle nature. You call it our soul, call it our higher self, call it the inner dimensions, the subtle planes of existence. So our consciousness, I feel, is rooted in the physical world. Like our physical bodies that you see and that you touch, it's just one part of us. But our consciousness, for the most part, for most people, is kind of rooted and locked and anchored and chained to the physical world. Like we have eyes that we see through. And if you really analyze what consciousness is, where is consciousness? Well, it's in our brain, maybe behind our eyes. Like when you have a sense of self in the physical realm, you have obviously your body and your seeing out from somewhere. You're seeing out there from in here. Well, this is all still physical. We haven't even addressed any of the other planes of existence yet. So everything that I've mentioned just now is physical. Our eyeballs, they're physical eyeballs. You can poke your eyeball if you want to. You can poke your brain if you somehow got your finger inside your skull. Physical. Okay. There's much more to life than that, and we all know that. We in the yoga world, you and I know that when we discuss these things and when we practice yoga, we know there's more than physical. So how do you get there? You can't really point to it. You can't. Where is it? Is it up? No, because God's up there. God's in the clouds. But we're not talking about. I'm just joking. So that's what I'm talking about. How do you unlock your awareness from this physical realm? Uproot it. Did you ever play Nintendo when you were a kid? Okay. I've been watching these documentaries lately on the story of like Super Mario Brothers 1, 2, and 3, and then the Game Boy. Anyway, do you remember how, I think it was Mario 2 maybe, where he would like squat down and you can pick up turnips out of the ground, like uproot it? That's kind of what our soul has to like pull up that turnip from the ground, which is our awareness, pull it out of the physical and bring it up into the more refined dimensions where our higher self or soul exists. The breath is the best doorway, gateway to use to walk there, calming the craziness of our attention or awareness by giving your mind something to focus on is a way to uproot. Doing it daily is a way to uproot. Yoga Nidra is a beautiful way to uproot the consciousness.
So when you tap into that feeling, like after a Yoga Nidra, where do you feel like the energy is coming from? Like, because I mean, that's something that I feel like we're kind of alluding to, is that there's some sort of increase in your power bar, like a replenishment.
Yes. Oh, I'm glad you're going there. That's good. Let's make the distinction though between like prana and energy, and then replenishing ourselves with rest. And the practice of Yoga Nidra doesn't necessarily generate a bunch of prana. Like your aura might get enlarged and charged up and changed, but it's not like we're doing deep pranayama, because you're really going to go to sleep. Like the physical body is not physical body, and then the etheric or the pranamaya kosha, the layer of ourselves that has the chakras and the meridians and all that. Those are relatively dormant during Yoga Nidra. So we're not really generating prana, like our chakras aren't spinning actively and stuff. But now this is going to get a little bit fun. I love geeking out. There is prana in the other planes. You've seen my chart many times, the chart that we have many times of the different planes. So in the physical world, there's electromagnetism. In the pranic realm, there's prana, which is the energy there. Well, in the astral realm, and in the mental realm, and in the realm of the soul, there are energies, shakti, if you will. Shaktis. There are different shaktis, energies on all planes that we work with. We talk about prana the most and chi in the Far East. Those are relatively lower in density compared to the type of energy that our soul uses. But there's shakti or energy in every level. So when we're in a state of Yoga Nidra, when we really can let our physical body rest and our prana and our lower mind even rest, there is an energy that's activated, and maybe that's what's replenishing our sense of tiredness and our sense of when our cup is empty. Because Yoga Nidra most definitely gives us rest. And some teachers, some traditions say that it's 5 to 10 times fold, meaning if you're spending 10 minutes in Yoga Nidra, multiply it by 5 times of what you would be receiving in regular sleep. So 10 minutes times 5, 50 minutes of like deep regular sleep can be achieved in 10 minutes of a Yoga Nidra practice. But some say it's even more, like 10 times the power of rest. So something is being activated and cultivated. Yeah.
And to bring a little bit of Western science into this,
Please.
Is like where Andrew Huberman talks about how there are studies that are showing how it helps regulate dopamine. Basically, it's kind of like regulating like our reward system. And I think about that as like where this is just me kind of pulling kind of theories and strings of why that happens, is where if so much of my, because I actually do Yoga Nidra during my lunch break. So that's
amazing.
like where,
so cool.
Where I don't drink caffeine through the day. And I just, the people that I work with know not to bother Dr. Lau or Jason during the 1 hour of the door closed, but I just listen to a guided Yoga Nidra.
Nice.
Sometimes I fall asleep, but usually it's kind of like this this feeling that you're kind of alluding to. This kind of I'm not asleep, but I'm also not completely engaged. I'm just in this kind of state of calm, and I feel like during that period, there's this like offloading that happens. I feel like it's like defragging, like it's like it's just restarting my computer in the day. So there's always like kind of the beginning half of the day in which I'm kind of just downloading or using a lot of when I think about energy, I think about it as my ability to take forward action, where, I can have physical energy or I can have mental energy. Sometimes they're not matching, but especially like after, on day 4 out of like 4 tens of like on the work week, I can feel physically tired, but I can still be mentally engaged after doing Yoga Nidra. So that's what I feel the value of that practice is for me, where it's different from caffeine, because even caffeine can make me feel physically maybe awake, but not have the mental clarity.
That's a very interesting point. It gets you clear in the mind and not necessarily in the body, but you can stay focused and use your mental capacity at a higher level, even though you might not feel totally rested in the body. Okay, I love that.
Which is essentially like where I feel that there's so much in terms of what people are coming in for in medicine. I think we kind of talked about this before, but just this idea that there's a very distractible mind that is very common in the world right now. And yes, there are legitimate problems like with ADHD and focus, but it's the discussion point that I want to emphasize is the idea of like, oh, is this a byproduct of the environment that we live in, or is this a byproduct of the structure that one is born with? And maybe it's a combination of both. But then beyond each point, it's the idea of where Yoga Nidra becomes this tool to practice how to direct this state of self-calm within one's mind. Which again, I think that there's the physical yoga practice, which is valuable too, but in a given day during my lunch hour, I don't really have time to go by the studio, but this is just this efficient way where I just push play, lay down. And it's a little different from meditation in my experience, where in meditation, sometimes I'm kind of find myself trying, maybe not necessarily not to think, but just like where I'm just maybe either focusing very heavily on the breath, but I still focus on the breath during Yoga Nidra. And maybe you can touch upon that, like how you, in the way you teach or how you've experienced the breathing practice of guided meditation versus Yoga Nidra.
Yeah, sure. Before we do that though, I just have a question. Are you listening to the same recording each time, or do you do different ones?
I listen to the same one. It's almost like this lullaby now, like where I always like fall asleep. And it's interesting because every time I listen to it, I actually, because it's a body scan kind of where she's kind of going through things, and she kind of says little nuances like brain heart coherence and like these little explorations of the body that I feel like I'm not always listening to the same one, but it is the same one, but I'm just like waking up and kind of being conscious at different points of the recording.
Lots of things there. It's such a fascinating process and practice. And so the idea, let's address the fact that sometimes we fall asleep. And the reason for that is we're tired, obviously. We're tired. And I think it can be used to fall asleep. It can be. But do we necessarily want to take a regular nap? Not necessarily. But if you have an hour and you're going to lie down for Yoga Nidra, maybe let yourself sleep, because at some level you are still hearing the instructions, even though you're not fully aware of them. So it shows us that we're very tired as a society and we need more sleep. So that's okay. If you want to try to stay awake and try to find that place of hovering, there's the technique that I have shared with you and other people when I teach. I learned it, of course, from my studies with Rod Stryker. It's doing the robot arm. It's just lifting one forearm perpendicular to the ground. And there is a little bit of muscular energy happening to keep it up, but it's not so much that it keeps you rooted into the physical world. It's not like you're bicep curling with weights or something. So that's a way to try to stay from falling into the unconscious sleep. Now, the breath. So what are we actually doing? What are the methods of the practice? Well, there are lots of methods. But before we talk about each one, let's address why there are so many methods. Just like in regular seated meditation, there are 1,000 ways to meditate. all of the meditation techniques require a degree of focus and concentration in the mind, which takes some energy. Like you're sitting upright in a meditative pose, your spine is tall, you're either in a chair or on the ground on a cushion, and it takes some energy to sit up, first of all, and secondly, to keep your mind focused when your mind will wander. Now, of course, when you're lying down, the mind wanders also, but the major difference between seated meditation and Yoga Nidra, which is also meditation, is that in Yoga Nidra, you can let go a lot more. You still need to stay a little bit focused, but you're kind of being shepherded and led as opposed to intentionally keeping your mind on a practice. A good meditation teacher will speak a little bit, but let a lot of silence happen in a seated meditation. In Yoga Nidra, there's less silence actually. There's more, and only usually towards the end because you need to be led, you need to be guided. In a seated meditation, once you know how to meditate and focus your mind, you don't need a recording anymore for a seated thing because you're intentionally doing a practice inside your body or your mind or your consciousness. So that's a major difference. So,
yeah, and that's actually where I feel the Yoga Nidra can be very accessible to people that don't like meditation, because sometimes during meditation people feel like, oh, am I doing this right? Am I doing this right? Especially when it's quiet, and maybe people's minds run more rampantly.
Oh gosh, thank you for bringing that up, because yes, someone who doesn't meditate a lot might think it's hard or it's so elusive or no way I can never meditate because I can't make my mind go blank. And that's the biggest misconception ever, because we're not trying to make the mind go blank in meditation. We're trying to focus the mind on one technique, on one thing. And when the mind wanders, bring it back. In Yoga Nidra, it's easier. It's a lot easier because you're just laying down and letting the voice guide you through different things. And yes, you do need to like kind of follow what it's saying a little bit, but just let go and let your body go. Your inner consciousness will still hear it. And yeah, it's a lot easier. Yoga Nidra is a shortcut to samadhi, I say. It's a shortcut to transcendence. Now, back to the question of breathing in a Yoga Nidra. Well, breathing is only one of many techniques. So why are there so many techniques in Nidra? And our listeners may have practiced a Yoga Nidra with a recording. There are probably 1,000 recordings you can find on Spotify, on YouTube, on the Mind Valley app. There's so many, right? There's so many because we address different things with each technique, specifically the different koshas, the different layers of our being. We address the physical body. There are certain techniques to address our pranic body, like we've already mentioned. There are certain techniques to address our emotions. Then there are certain Yoga Nidra techniques to address our lower mind, our higher mind, and our intuition, and then complete transcendence as well. There are lots of techniques. And usually most Yoga Nidra practices will be systematic, and you'll first do something to relax the physical body. The instructions might be like, okay, feel your legs become heavy into the ground. Feel the other meeting points of your body becoming heavy to the ground. Notice your throat and relax it. Notice your chest, relax it. Physical stuff. And then there might be a breathing technique, perhaps. And because the breath relates to prana, which is our next more subtle sheath or kosha, the pranamaya kosha. And the breathing techniques can be so many different things. Slow, deep breathing. It can be a kriya. It can be the technique that we've done called 75 breaths, where you draw lines up the body with your breath. Just, of course, you're not moving. You're just laying down. So the breathing techniques are to address our pranamaya kosha, the part of us that has our chakras and nadis. It shouldn't be something too energetic like Kapalabhati or breath of fire. We're not going to be doing that because you're laying down with your palms up and you're being still for the most part. And then after the physical body is addressed, our prana is addressed usually through different breathing things. Then there are so many other techniques to do if you have enough time to go farther.
Real quick, for prana, like, can you help me understand what you feel when your prana? I don't know if I'm using this like kind of context right. Like pranic energy is high versus low, just so that we can be on the same page.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Yeah, prana can be nebulous. Let's think of prana as how much enthusiasm do you have, or how much energy do you have to go get up and do things. Now, it doesn't have to be physical things. It can be sitting still and writing something, or sitting typing, or contemplating. Your mind needs prana to think. you replenish your prana when you lay down during your lunch break. Even though your physical body may not feel super energized, you said yourself that your mind is charged up and ready. There's prana there. So it can be physical, of course. You need prana to go to the gym. You need prana to go to a physical yoga practice class. But you also need prana to think and to solve problems and to write things on paper and see a patient and consult. Our physical voice requires prana because we're using muscles, but our mind requires prana to think about what we're going to say. So prana is all of that.
Do you feel like prana can be, is it coming from the individual? Like, is it coming from outside the individual?
Einstein tells us that matter and energy are interchangeable, and neither one can be created nor destroyed. So it's in us, it's around us. We can manipulate it, we can receive it, we can waste it, we can suck it from others, we can give it to others, we can generate it in mindful ways. The whole science of Tantra is exactly this: is the manipulation of energy. What are some of the best sources to get it? Nature, grass, some sun, mild sun, deep breathing, positive thinking, nutritious foods. Joy can generate prana. Laughter. Joy is a funny conundrum because you kind of have to have some to feel joyful, but then you get more when it's contagious. So these are ways to generate it, but it also does exist in our body already. We wouldn't be alive if we didn't have it. Our body would die if we didn't have any prana in us. The heart would stop beating if there was no electromagnetic influence happening to make our nervous system wouldn't work. So we do have it innately, but we can also generate more and use it wisely or use it unwisely. That's part of the reason why brahmacharya is one of the basic practices in learning to become a mindful yogi. Brahmacharya means, some people translate it to no sex, but that's not a universal translation. A better translation, I think, is wise management of your sexual energy, because a lot of us expend sexual energy in tremendously random and mindless ways. We lose a lot of prana by engaging in like intimacy with like the wrong people, too many people, random people. That's an example of wasting prana.
Or even like the wrong things. Like, 'cause I'm just like thinking about, that's almost like how the addictive mind is formed, where it's just this constant chasing the dragon, chasing like the dopamine fix, chasing even like the phone, or even like what social media can do.
Yes.
Because that's where like, again, I think, especially for those that maybe are watching, or even that maybe aren't familiar with these words, it's like, I mean, I think the feeling that can become maybe relatable to anybody is that feeling of, I slept a good night's sleep, but I still feel like I can't get out of bed. And it's this sense that like, that like when you mentioned the joy component of things, where there's a barrier to what even someone feels aligned with maybe their purpose. Like if someone doesn't have a purpose, like if I don't have no reason to get out of bed, then why would I just not why would I not just like continue to watch Netflix, or do something like that? But it's this idea that where you're using these words to describe, I feel like, a way to kind of help someone find take steps towards getting connected with themselves, so that they can find the clarity to find their purpose and find their joy, find the energy to take the action that'll help break the cycle of like this kind of dead end kind of of closed loop of access to something that was once part of them that no longer is.
Prana can solve that, believe it or not. I do this. It might be controversial for me to say that, but injecting, infusing, imbuing ourselves with more prana can break those cycles, I believe. Yeah.
And then like, again, kind of like focusing, I mean, kind of like defining that prana again, like, or kind of like re-exploring that the way that you described, because like you kind of listed a lot of different things that seem like great way, like hobbies basically.
Sure.
Well, yeah. I mean, just like activities,
yes.
and ways to engage with the world,
yes.
engage with others. Cause that's where I think like even my previous understanding of prana was like, I would just, whenever you mentioned that, before in classes and such, I would think that you're just talking about breathing. But from our conversation now, I'm realizing that you see it as almost this very, basically it's what runs the world.
It is what runs the world. It is. Yes, the world would die without prana. It's true. It's so true. And there's a sphere of it. Like there's research being done on what is the network that connects all living things, because there is something that connects living things. What is it? And since the atmosphere is physical, like the planet has gases and air and things, but there's also a network that does connect all living things. Is it a pranic network? Is it a mental network? It's something there, and we can tap into it or cut ourselves off from it. We can use it or not use it. We can choose to participate in life, family with the rest of living things, or think we're in this alone.
Yes. No, and I agree. I think it's those moments where, when I actually think it is just me, that I feel less energized. But when I feel connected, and that's where a big practice of why I love doing these with you is that I feel connected to you, and even to, not necessarily with the intention of like connecting with a whole bunch of other people, but the potentials for that to like open up conversations in the future with other people is what it brings me joy, or fills me up, of this idea that there's this invisible network of opportunity to connect and meet other people that are seeking as well. They're seeking this idea that there's something more than what I see and experience with my five senses.
Yes, it's true. A perfect example of that exact concept about the people that are seeking. And do you not feel something different when you practice yoga in a class versus when you practice yoga by yourself at home? There's clearly a different feeling. That's prana. That's energy. Have you ever told someone, or has someone ever told you, you got good energy, dude?
Yeah.
That's your aura is prana. Your aura is prana. If we were clairvoyant and we could see on the other planes, we could see energy, you would see someone glowing with an aura. I like to reference the Matrix movies a lot. Do you like the Matrix movies?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Do you know who Seraph is? Seraph is the tiny Asian guy who's the protector of the Oracle.
Oh yeah.
And when Neo first meets Seraph, it doesn't show Seraph through the physical eyes. It shows him sitting, and he's a being of light radiating, and his aura is radiant. That's kind of, I believe, what we would see if we had clairvoyant sight. And you can feel that when you come close to someone physically, you feel them in a way. Some of us aren't sensitive to that, but it's real. It is definitely real. And when you give someone a massage, or when you shake someone's hand, there's powerful energy being transferred. You can do it unconsciously, which most people do. You could do it very consciously, which is like what a Reiki master would be doing, giving energy through their hands, physically, or not even touching someone. You can do it without even using your hands. You can do it remotely. Therapeutic touch is a technique of healing through your hands. I mean, a healer uses prana to heal others. Even in the Bible, there's a passage, I can't even begin to say where it is, but it references the idea of Jesus having, so he was a healer. If Jesus is what the Bible says he is, he was a healer. Yeah. So that's prana. Like if your heart is failing, you need energy, it needs prana. We're getting kind of off topic. I'm getting kind of off topic.
No. But circling back to like even what I feel like Yoga Nidra does in terms of cultivating prana, can you talk about like why or how you start to incorporate that in terms of your daily life?
I use Yoga Nidra like you do, and more if I have the time in my day and can. But I will lay down at least one time a day, almost every single day. I don't make it a command or a requirement. I don't, but I make it a healthy routine, and so it happens almost every single day. It's usually in the afternoon, in the early afternoon. Sometimes I will lay down. I usually will doze off as well because I don't get enough sleep always. But I use it for replenishing. I use it for a meditation. I use it to connect with my inner self, to uproot my consciousness.
And then when you connect with your inner self, do you feel like you're having a conversation with yourself?
Not of the lower mind, though. When we start to get familiar with these experiences, non-physical experiences, it's hard to really put some of that into words. I think most people can relate to that. So one of the techniques I do, one of the practices I do regularly it's a technique called sleeping with the yogis, and it's communing with our wise teachers, whoever they may be. And one of our wise teachers is our own damn higher self. So that's the technique, is to commune with them. Do I know what's being said or taught? Not necessarily, unless I go in with a specific question. But something happens. Just like when you're with someone, you are transferring energy. Do you know exactly how much or to what degree or where it's coming in or out? No, but something's happening.
Yeah. And just to quickly like touch upon that little tangent, but that idea of connecting to like, are you connecting to like past yogis, like past teachers for yourself, or just even all teachers that have come before the whole practice in your experience?
All of it. Unless we have a specific guru some people will have a tradition where they worship a deity. The deity may at one point in time have had a physical body, but that doesn't mean the deity doesn't exist anymore. That entity still is there somewhere. That could be happening. For me personally, it would be my higher self, of course, which is me. But there are certain teachers that I revere as wise gurus that are still around and that do hang around Earth and teach in various ways, but maybe not with physical bodies. So everyone that has a physical body has a higher self as well. Even if you don't have a physical body, your soul is still there. And I'll intend to communicate soul to soul with those teachers.
This is where I'm getting... probably going on a little other tangents, but when you say inner self and like higher self, are those the same?
Yeah, so many different terms. Yeah.
And with that though, do you feel like because you do yoga nidra and meditation that like you find yourself connecting with that part of yourself more fluidly at times, like say when you're teaching?
1000%. And that's the point. That is the point. How can we eventually start to operate in the physical world through our soul's consciousness? Because the soul is not physical. But how do we do that? We don't want to forget about our soul. Okay, we're going to meditate and remember we're spiritual beings for 5 minutes. Okay, now I'm done meditating. Forget that. I'm going to go do other things and forget that I have a spiritual self. And most people do that. But no, I would rather live in a state of like dual consciousness meditation. So I'm connected, but also I need my eyes open. I got to see where I'm driving. I have to meet people and shake hands and sign documents sometimes, but I don't want to forget that I'm connected to my spirit.
Yes.
It's living that way.
And like the visualization, and it kind of touches on a tool that like one of my mentors kind of taught me about, which is like this kind of split screen approach, which is that like where you're connected with your inner self, and then you're also connected with the outside world. So it's like this idea of like, yes, I'm engaging with you, but then there's that part of me inside that's my subconscious that's also engaging with you. This is what I've kind of like what I was talking to Chris, who taught yoga today, where it's something that I notice how a lot of teachers are able to be very present in terms of like having a multiple engagement with the students, the whole classroom, and themselves at the same time. And I feel like that ability to do that is something that I imagine is almost like this flow state. Because like normally, if someone was trying to hold their consciousness or trying to hold their attention towards multiple states, it's like driving with your phone. It usually ends up in an accident. But when it's done very intentionally and obviously with like some level of previous practice, it seems almost very almost like a well-organized band.
Nice. I love that.
In terms of like that inner consciousness that you kind of touch into, or that higher self that you touch into, do you feel like that is the same thing as like a flow state that people sometimes describe?
Yes. and you're nailing it over time and time again, man. You're on the level for sure. A flow state is one way to describe a state of moving meditation, a state of intense presence. Whenever we become intensely present, where we're not worried about stuff that's happened in the past and we're not anxious about things that may or may not happen in the future. Whenever those both fall away and we're intensely present, we're so hyper aware of the present moment, whether we're teaching a yoga class, whether we're an investigator on a crime scene, a Sherlock Holmes type of person almost is like psychic because they're so present. They sense patterns and they sense, okay, how could this puzzle piece fit here? If the window's broken there, but the bullet hole's over there, they're present. They're figuring things out. And when Chris was teaching this morning and when I teach, I try to get into a flow state for sure. And it does come with, you said, some practice. It's both. We're conscious in the room, we're looking at our students, but also there's something deeper going on. Many people report this kind of phenomena that goes on. It's almost like you're being given the information.
Chris Blunt talks about that too a lot. Where I would ask her where her nuances kind of sometimes come from. But it seems so. I've come to feel that. For those that maybe are like, oh, that's just woo-woo, it's that idea of, I don't know why I'm sharing this right now, but it seems appropriate and it's so fitting in the moment. And sometimes it lands and I don't know where that piece of information came from. Yes, maybe it came from a pattern of the past of something that I've once heard but to know how to finely place, it's the idea of like of a finely placed like ingredient, or even like in a song when you hear it where a certain layer of sound comes in and it lands in a certain way that feels so appropriate. That's what I feel like the flow state is like engaging in when people are creating or when people are speaking or engaging and communicating and connecting with one another. I feel a lot in medicine, like where there's these aspects of where I don't know, where I sometimes I get stuck in like whether it's trying to figure out how to solve a problem for someone or even what question to ask to kind of guide someone, especially if they're like English as their second language. But then there's like these subtle, like when I kind of quiet my mind and I'm not trying so hard to kind of get lost in this kind of tunnel vision, for lack of better words, is the idea of usually there's something that comes up that I get inspired by to say that kind of helps move and kind of connect a dot that I normally wouldn't have connected.
It's so good. Yes.
Which it takes time. And that's a whole other thing. That's why I love, why I used to think about yoga classes like, I was like, oh my gosh, 75 minutes is so long. But then, but now it seems like it's like it can be longer sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's the idea of that it's in that period of time that it takes for me to really chip away at so much of my very conditioned mind to kind of see so superficially. And then it's that idea of like, by the time Shavasana comes, I get really into a state of like taking, kind of touching onto some of the words you talk about, like kind of like uprooting uprooting
consciousness from the physical world, uprooting it.
Yes. Where it's like this idea of I look at it as a helicopter view, where there's the helicopter view where I see outside of myself, and then I see outside myself even as there's even like where now I'm kind of practicing this idea of like kind of taking a bigger helicopter view. Where I was talking to Sharon about this, I was like, when you look at the earth, you don't see individuals, you just see one unified entity.
Yes.
And that's where when I actually think about that, especially in times when I'm like, oh, why am I doing what I'm doing at work, or what is the point of any of this? Like I kind of try to let go of the weight of how I view myself as an individual needing to do anything, and look at it as, I am one of a larger whole, and not to put so much pressure on anything need to be anything other than me just being a part of this experience.
You're touching on so many great things here, my man.
Is this some like Eckhart Tolle stuff?
Oh, it certainly is. Yeah. My gosh. Chipping away by the end of the practice, being present, flow state, Man, where should we go deeper into? I mean, there's lots of.
I would be curious to say that, like, where one of the things that I think that going back to that uprooting the consciousness, where it's like there's this, and you kind of touched upon it, like with what I feel like nature does and such, is that it's this realization that we're all connected, that there's this underlying network that is not visible to the eye. That's where, like, even how, in mycology or like mushrooms, like they have a mycelium network of like how they're all kind of communicating, connecting, like some Avatar stuff.
Yes. Yes. I bet if we could see the other planes, there would be some kind of network that looks like that. Or it's been described as like a sea or an ocean. And then in the ocean of this substance, each individual is like a condensing of the same material. A focal point, if you will. Like if it's, or you can think of like a fog machine that's hovering, a fog that's over the ground. If fog gathers in one space, that might be what it seems like. Or it could be a physical network of neurons, like a neural network maybe.
Yeah.
But there is a connection somehow.
And do you get to see, I'd imagine, especially you as the observer, as a teacher, like what is that, do you like get to see that as like this kind of collective orchestra of people moving in
a specific class? I haven't made that specific correlation of the class like that, but it certainly does apply. I contemplate that concept in meditation relating to every human on earth, though. I see the globe, like when you said you were talking to Sharon about that. I love seeing the globe, the earth, from an astronaut's perspective. It's one of the meditations that I love to teach and I love to do, is seeing the earth from that perspective, and then having the knowingness that there's so many trillions of energy patterns going on down there, but they're invisible because from the grand perspective, it's perfect, it's blue, it's round, it's gorgeous, it's silent. But only when you go down into it do you realize that there's so many connections and so much happening. So I like to think of all life connected kind of that way. I also, I won't diverge too much, but I also study a theosophical concept. Terry and I are doing a video series called the Mahatma Letters right now. And we just, yesterday we recorded session number 23. So 21 videos are up on the website, or on YouTube, just like ours are, and anyone can go watch those. And these sessions are about some of these wise teachers that I was referring to earlier that I would connect to in my practice of Yoga Nidra. We call them Mahatmas, great teachers, or adepts, or masters of wisdom. The teaching behind how they operate is, and I'll tie this back to our concept of a network of energy. They are constantly helping the world, constantly giving assistance, but not gross physical assistance. They're giving subtle assistance. They're giving prana. They're giving ideas to inspire. They're giving solutions to problems to world leaders. And if the leaders have this portal open inside themselves to receive something, they might receive some assistance that way. And the way that they look over the world is, of course, from the higher mental plane or the soul level, the higher self level, call it whatever you want. And it's not their physical eyes. They're in a meditative state, but they see or sense the whole world as a network of energy or of substance, a stratum, if you will, of energy. And then each person or each soul that exists on earth is a focal point of energy. Some are brighter than others. Some who have more prana and more soul connection are brighter, and the masters see that, or the adepts see that. But it's not like a face. It's not Jason's face with glasses. It's not my face. It's a focal point of energy. And the ones that are brighter, they might focus on those that are brighter, that have more energy, that are doing more for the world, giving more influential, and they'll send assistance to those people, those brighter souls. So that's a long explanation, but that's kind of how I like to see the world too. We're all energy. Some of us are just focal points that are brighter. We're all focal points. Some are brighter than others.
That's beautiful. I feel like, and do you feel like that's what almost drives people to almost want to be in this like communities drives people towards being, or humans are social creatures, or this sense of push towards that?
Yeah. The brightness I'm talking about is also magnetic. It also feels good. If someone has a lot of charisma, we naturally want to be around that person. A lot of people have magnetic personalities. It's not just a phrase, it's real. You want to be around people like that. We're social creatures. That's a very real thing.
Yeah. No, this is great. Concluding with like the kind of bigger thing of like Yoga Nidra of almost like to as a selling point. I think like there's so many aspects that we kind of touched upon of like the value for people, like whether it's connecting with myself, and then by doing so, I'm able to better connect with other people, or even just getting physical or emotional, mental clarity. If you were to talk to like your previous your younger self about this, like how would you guide them in terms of, or any younger person or any person that's listening, how would you guide them to creating a practice or seeking a practice with Yoga Nidra?
Thank you for making this so practical, man. I would say to my younger self, or to any person who's going to dabble in this, find a recording of a Nidra practice that you like, that you resonate with, and just do it. Do it every day. And it doesn't have to be 30 or 45 minutes. There are some that are 45 minutes long. That's long. Find one that's 15 minutes, 10 minutes, but you lie down and you don't actually have to do anything. It's rest. So find one. I've got a few on my YouTube channel that I've recorded. There are so many that we can recommend, and just do it. There's nothing fancy. Just lie down and do it. The techniques, like we've said, are multitudinous, but the most basic ones, it's usually some kind of rotation of consciousness, like focus on your right ankle, focus on your left ankle, focus on your right knee, focus on your left knee. And there might be some other things after that. And that's really it. It's nothing too crazy. If it goes deeper, yes, you can commune. Then imagine yourself. There could be a technique of walking into a temple and meeting your higher, like shaking hands with your higher self. And it's some visualization. So what I would say is pick a recording, find one that you like, that you'll do, and then just do it. Do it routinely, preferably every day. It's simple.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Paul, for introducing it to me. It's changed a lot of my daily routines, and it helps me be more engaged with work.
Man, it's so valuable, isn't it? It's so practical. It helps a lot.
Yeah.
Yoga Nidra.
And with that being said, Paul, you got anything cooking over these next few months? What do you got going on in your life?
Yeah, man. We're going to run another clarity workshop soon. I like to do 2 a year. You've been to 2 of them. The mid-year one will be in July. The dates are on the website, newrajayoga.com, 7 sessions. So it's late July. And then not too long after that, Gabby Aguilar and I are going to the Red Mountain Resort in St. George, Utah for a 3-night yoga retreat. That's happening August 22nd. Thanks for asking. It's 3 nights, all-inclusive yoga retreat that we're leading, and you guys can join for that.
Why do you like doing this? May be a whole other podcast, but what do you feel was drawing you to Utah this time around? Is this your first time doing it in Utah?
Second time in Utah. Yeah. The yoga retreat concept, the phenomenon of going on a retreat to do yoga is just so powerful, because it's the techniques and tools that we do in our daily life, but when you do them removed from all of our heaviness and adulting and stresses, they're so much more powerful. And it's almost like you multiply their effectiveness by 100 when you take yourself out of the normal routines that are either humdrum or even stressful or even dangerous maybe, or unhealthy. Yeah, man. Do the same things in a beautiful natural environment with like-minded souls in nature. Oh, the effects are going to be multiplied by a lot.
Oh yeah. I feel like that's episode 5, yoga retreats. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, my man.
Yeah.